a pleasing sound. Lord, I offer you my love. On the internet. And it's good to learn, but you got to realize that you can't all be Hillsong United. You can't all be Bethel. You got to be yourself. And if you forget everything that you heard me say tonight, this is the one thing I want you to remember. Be yourself. Just be yourself. Full of people, I'll say to Laura, what if somebody says hello to me? What should I do? She says, say hello. But I think people see me on the stage and they think this is what Don loves to do. I never wanted to do this, and yet God clearly spoke to me back in the early 1980s. Like it was a dream. I heard a voice and somebody said to me, open your Bible and turn to Psalm 40, verse 3. And I opened my Bible, I read that, and it says, I have put a new song in your mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see it and fear and put their trust in the Lord. And I didn't know then what it meant, but I knew God had put something in my heart to do. And God chooses unlikely people. A lot of you are on the stage on Sunday. How many are actually up on a platform on a Sunday in your churches? So you find yourself, go ahead, raise your hand. You're on a stage at a church on a Sunday morning. Probably a lot of you feel a little intimidated. Like, why am I here? And in the early days of leading worship, I've started finding myself on a stage with people who I would consider to be my heroes. Like, oh my gosh, it's Chris Tomlin, it's Michael W. Smith, it's, and I would be so intimidated. And in one ear, I would hear, you better dial it up, because Don Moen is not enough. You need to be cooler than you are. And then in the other ear, I would hear, which is the Holy Spirit saying, Don, just be Don Moen. Just be yourself. And guess what? Chris Tomlin can't be Don Moen. And Don Moen can't be Chris Tomlin. You can't be me, and I can't be you. See, that's the beautiful thing about leading worship. I mean, God, and this is for preachers too. You can watch the internet and you watch preachers, and I see all the time preachers that try to be just like the preacher they saw on television. All the little movements, all the things they say. And I look today and I'm very comfortable with the people that we're around. Are sinners coming to your church? Are people coming up to you on the street, and are they attracted to you because you're a worshiper? You look at the life of Jesus, and I see, the people that killed him were the religious people. They're the ones that tried to destroy him. But Jesus was out with those who needed a Savior, and he was approachable. So, as a leader, if God has chosen you to be on a platform, pastors, singers, musicians, make a point to make yourself available in your church. Let people know that there's nothing special about you. And I was singing at a church in Florida one time, and after the service, I was kind of standing down here in the front, just like this, just saying hello to a few people. And this guy came walking down the aisle over here, and he had a lady walking with him. He had he had a cut-off t-shirt, a lot of tattoos, a leather vest. I think he had leather jeans on, leather slacks. He had some chains hanging down, and he looked pretty tough. And his the lady that was with him looked about the same way. But he came walking down the aisle and he came right up to me and he said, you, I like what you do. My woman here, she likes it too. And then he turned around and walked away. But to me, that was a great compliment. The fact that that guy felt comfortable enough to come up and tell me that. And as worship leaders, don't just look at the front 3 rows of your church, because they're gonna follow you. They're gonna do whatever you tell them to do, and they're gonna be smiling at you. But I always kind of check out the folks on the back row who maybe drove a truck 90 hours last week. They're sitting back there, you know, and what are you doing on this stage that's connecting with them? Are you keeping it real? And when I was a young worshiper, I used to be intimidated by when I'd look out at an audience and I'd see somebody like this. Try to find somebody with a smile on their face. But now, you know, it doesn't bother me anymore. I was singing at this church. They had a grand piano kind of right down on the floor, and there was this guy sitting like 3 rows back, and the whole concert he sat there like this. Staring at me. And you know, it's like, what an interesting guy, I thought. And after the concert, and I was intrigued by him. After the concert, the organizers came to me and said, "Oh, we apologize. We're so sorry that John was this guy. What's his last name? John. Anyway, I forget now. He ended up being one of my a real good friend of mine. He's since passed on, but he said he's a new ager. He's into New Age, and we apologize that he sat right there and stared at you the whole time. But I've got to the point where it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me that, you know, because people are thinking. They're trying to figure out, are you real or are you a phony? And that's why I say, be yourself. Because even if it's not perfect, you have to let people know that what you have is authentic. It's real. And these days, people can smell a phony miles away. And if you're on the stage trying to be somebody that you're not, sinners are going to know it in a minute. They'll know it. They'll say, oh, what a fake, what a phony. But, you know, to have somebody like that, people are coming into your churches, and they'll come into your life at your job or somewhere, and they're watching. They're watching. Who are you as a worshiper? Are you real? Are you approachable? Are you authentic? So you need to be the same person on this stage as you are out there. And pastors and worship leaders, you need to be the same person at home with your family as you are on the stage. Don't go home and be a real jerk to your wife and then get on stage, oh yes, God, we love you so much. And you shouted at your wife all the way to church. You know, keep it real. I remember trying to get to church with 5 little kids. I felt I had to get saved before I got on the platform. It's like, oh my gosh, how do we do this? And you know, think about that when you look at your congregation. They walked through. They didn't have a reserved place. You know, they just, no matter. You know, they walked a long way. They worked a long time to get there. And the last thing they need is for you to be a fake and a phony and to go through the motions. These people really want to touch God. They just want something authentic and real. I love writing songs. We'll talk about songwriting in a little bit here, but I love writing songs with a guy named Paul Balash. Do you know Paul at all? So Paul is an interesting guy because he led worship at his little church in Texas, Tyler, Texas, for many, many years. But when we'd be working on a song, he would be imagining the people coming into his church. And it was only a church of about 150 people, not big. So he knew everybody. So when we write a song, and we wrote "Thank You, Lord" together. But when we'd be writing the song, he'd always try to play his guitar, and kind of, as we're writing it, he's imagining himself as leading worship at his church. And he'd say, "I come before you today. Hey John, how are you today, brother? There's just one thing that I want. Hi Joni, how are you doing? That's what he tried to imagine. So think about that when you're picking your songs for the service. Just pick something don't pick something that the musicians are going to be so thrilled to play. Pick a song that people coming in out of a busy life, you can only imagine if they got 4 or 5 kids what they went through to get there. And what is going to connect with them? Something simple, something not over the top. A lot of people think you have to start with a rocking song, everything just up. Well, a lot of times I'm not ready for that on a Sunday morning. I'd rather kind of ease in. That's why I like to start with sometimes just give thanks. I was at a church in Canada, and I started the concert with "Give Thanks," and I heard a tambourine on the front row. With a grateful give thanks. And it's like, wow, who is that lady? And I think she thought if I was truly anointed, I would start with a fast song. And she had her tambourine ready, and she was so disappointed. And I started with something slower. It turned out it was the pastor's wife, by the way. And there was another church in Canada. This pastor said to me, "I'll get the audience going, and then I'll hand it when I nod to you. You come up." So there's a couple thousand people there, and he started. He had a full band. There was brass, there were singers, there was a full rhythm section, and he was kind of leading the worship too. And he got into this whole thing of all these fast, he started going faster and faster and faster, and everybody was jumping, and then he looked at me and he goes, I said, "No." They're ready for you. So I got up on the stage, and I kind of went with it for about 1 minute, and everything in my heart was saying, "No, I cannot do this." So I said to the band, "Stop, everybody stop." And the pastor was on the front row. He goes, "What did you do? I got this all ready for you." I said, "Hey, everybody, just sit down for a second." I said, "Look at you. You're just all sweating." And what is it? Deuteronomy 18, somewhere it says, the priests were not allowed to wear anything that caused them to sweat in the presence of God. And I said, "Look at you. You're all sweating and tired." I said, "The presence of God is not somewhere that you have to work and work and work to get to. I want you to think about the fact that God is with us. if you're a believer, He is with us. He's in us. Let's begin to thank Him for His presence that's already here. And I started there. I started over, and we had a great service. But as a worship leader, you need to simply just pick the right songs and pick them in the right key. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Because Hillsong United and Chris Tomlin and Bethel, like last night I sang a song, Your Love Never Fails. Okay, it's like nothing. I do it in the key of F, which is D minor. Bethel does it like it. Nothing can separate. I mean, it's so high that I love the song, but I couldn't sing it in that key. Chris Tomlin does How Great Is Our God in the key of C, or sometimes C sharp. How great is our God, sing with me, how great. And if you're leading worship in a church, a normal church, you know, the men are not going to sing that E early in the morning. They're not going to do it. So I put it in the key of G. I was actually at a worship conference in Austin, Texas, where Chris was living at the time. And we had just done a tour together. And he wasn't on the billing to teach or to sing, but he just came in, and I happened to be singing. So during the singing, I sang, How Great Is Our God, sing with me, how great, which is in the key of G. And since it was about 3,000 worship leaders there, it was a worship conference, I said, let's talk about this, picking the right song in the right key. Now, I didn't know Chris was there. And I said, Chris Tomlin does this in the key of C, or C sharp. So, how great is our God? Sing with me, how great. And I said, it works for Chris at a passion conference, but at the Methodist church where I was singing at the time, it's like, the men are not going to sing that. Sing with me. Same with Israel Houghton or any of the contemporary songs, the keys are way up here. So I said, I put it in the key of G. Anyway, I walked backstage after my set, and who did I run into but Chris Tomlin. Yeah. And he says, hey Don, so you're dissing my song, huh? I said, no, I'm not. I'm making a point. And they wanted to know if I would introduce the next band, which happened to be Lincoln Brewster. And they had to have a setup there. And I signed Lincoln Brewster. He's a good friend, and he toured with me as well. But I said, okay, I'll go out to the audience. They needed 7 minutes of me killing time while they set up the band. So I said to Chris, hey, if you can hang around for a couple of minutes, let's have some fun with this. So I went out, and I started talking to the people, and I said, yeah, you'll never guess who I ran into backstage, but Chris Tomlin, and he said, oh, hey, Don, you're making fun of my song, huh? And about that time, Chris walked out on the stage, and he sat down at the piano, and I could see all the audience are looking at Chris, and he sits down, they're going, oh my gosh, it's Chris Tomlin, Chris Tomlin. So he sits down, and he says, Don, what key would you like me to sing my song in? I said, well, sing it in the key of C and prove to the people that it won't work. Of course, you know, he did it in the key of, and 3,000 people screamed the song out, you know, but we had a good time with it. But, you know, if you're at a passion conference or a big deal, people can carry that. But if you're, a lot of you, anybody here at a church that's bigger than 2,000 people? How about 200 people? How about 100 people? Yeah. Okay, so you got to look at it realistically. If you have 100 people in your church, Don't get up there and try to rock out with a Hillsong United song or a Chris Tomlin song or a Israel Houghton song in the keys that they do it in. Because I think if you look at your congregation, they'll probably be standing there going, I want to sing, but it's so hard, it's so high. As a worship leader, sometimes it's as simple as picking the right song in the right key. How Great Is Our God is a great song. I sing it all the time, but in the key of C, it's not going to work for a lot of my audience. And that's another thing you need to think about. Who is your audience? Who are you singing to? If you've got a lot of older people in your church, you need to think about what songs you're choosing. Because again, the goal is not to introduce them to all the new hip, cool songs. There's a time and a place for that. But the goal is you might have 15 or 20 minutes and they need to touch God. So what is it going to take? It's sometimes as simple as the right song in the right key. As a worship leader, you need to be a really good song policeman. You need to say no to the bad songs and yes to the good songs. And you know, if you have to have a full band and 3 key changes to make the song work, it's probably not a great song. You know, for many years, 20 years, I was with Integrity Music, and I listened to thousands and thousands of songs. And people would send me the songs, and they would produce it up, and they'd do 5 key changes, and you know what? In the end, it was still a bad song. You can try to hide it, but you cannot polish a turd. You know, I mean, it's you can't polish something that's bad and make it with a key change and try to hide it. If it's bad, it's bad. So a lot of times I would say to people, just sing a song with your guitar or sing it with your piano and send me that demo. If it's a good song, it will live even in a simple production. And so as a worship leader, you really need to think about what songs you're singing. Why are you singing them? And you need to think about this with your pastor as well. That's another whole topic, you know, pastor-worship leader relationships. I don't know about here in Qatar, but in the United States, and I think all over the world, we have these worship wars, you know. The people leave churches and join churches because of the music. Pastors and worship leaders split because my pastor doesn't understand me. You know, you got to understand, worship leaders, here's something you need to understand about your pastor. Your pastor is a visionary. He's not thinking about the touchy-feely worship leader who needs, oh, brother, that's beautiful. Your pastor is building a church, and he's thinking about the big vision. And what will happen is you will rehearse your band for 2 weeks on a song because you're going to do it on Sunday morning. And then your pastor gets up and he said, hey, cut that. We don't have time for that right now. And he starts preaching. And your little heart is going to break because he just doesn't understand me. My pastor doesn't get it. And you need to stop being so sensitive. You're there to serve your pastor. Set it up for him. You know, last couple of nights, I had a guy that I'd never met, Gary, Pastor Gary from Hillsong. He came and, you know, they wanted him to speak. And, you know, I'm careful about who I have come and speak because it reflects on Don Moen, too. And I'm also thinking about the flow of the service. You know, but what I tried to do was set up Gary in the best possible place. Not after my last song, God is Good, where the audience is up, the concert feels like it's over. Hey, now, over to you, Gary. No, I set him up the best I could to come and deliver the word. And then I picked it up. That's our job. And that's what you need to do for your pastor. And you need to earn his trust. There was a friend of mine, a worship leader in North Carolina, and he said, my pastor does not understand worship. And I said, well, how long do you have to lead worship? He said, 5 minutes. I said, well, what did you do last week? He said, well, I did 6 songs. I said, you did 6 songs in 5 minutes? Why? I said, next week, do 2 songs and end in 4 minutes, and your pastor will be impressed. And I talked to him. I said, he was going to leave the church to go to find a pastor that really understood worship. And I said, no, you need to earn your pastor's trust. If he gives you 5 minutes, take 4 minutes. If he gives you 10 minutes, take 9 minutes. Okay? It's all about earning the trust. And once you have your pastor's trust, he'll give you a lot more latitude, you see? You got to realize that it's not about you. And it's really not about your pastor. It's about the combination of everything, creating an atmosphere that welcomes the presence of God. And that's preaching, that's prayer, that's testimony, that's worship music. It's all those things. You have to earn your pastor's trust. Anyway, this guy went back to his church, and he really spent some time meeting with his pastor. And he said, "What are you wanting to say, and what are you going to be preaching on? What would you like me to do?" And in about a couple of weeks, he said, "Why don't you take 10 minutes? Rather than 5 minutes, take 10." And a couple of weeks later, he said, "Why don't you take 15 minutes? And then why don't you take 20? Now they had a church, they take about 30 minutes and worship. Why? Because he didn't run away to another pastor. He took the time to understand his pastor's heart and understand that his job is there to serve. Stop being so sensitive as a worship leader. And we'll talk about that in songwriting too. If you want to be a songwriter, you better get skin that is made of leather. Because when you present your song to your congregation and they stare at you blankly like, you're going to get your feelings hurt. So as worship leaders, as a worship team, stop being so sensitive. You got to understand what your role is and understand who your pastor is. Like I said, most pastors are visionaries. And if you've ever done any personality profiles, the pastor, those kind of folks, they're driving, they're going forward. Did I step on something? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. Just boom, they're building something, they're going. And we are these sensitive little worship people, musicians, and we want all this touchy-feely thing. You got to kind of get over that a little bit. Understand what your role is. Get to know your pastor and serve him. I was in Atlanta, Georgia at a conference one time, and I was there for 2 nights. And the first night, I thought we had a really wonderful time of worship. There's about 2,000 people at this conference. Just as I was about to go on the stage the second night, the moderator came to me and he said, "Tonight, I don't want you talking in between your songs." And I said, excuse me? He goes, "Last night, we did not worship." I said, "I thought we had a great time of worship." He goes, "Trust me, we didn't." And so I'm thinking, where is this conversation going? Now you got to understand, it's like 5 minutes before I'm supposed to sing. He said, tonight, I want you to sing. Oh, he said, when you talk between your songs, you draw attention to yourself and away from Jesus. And I thought, well, that's the last thing I want to do. But he said, tonight, I'm going to be on the platform, and you sing one song. And when you're finished with that song, you look at me, and if I nod, you can sing another song. True. Well, I have to admit, I checked my watch and I thought, if I leave now, I can catch the last flight out of Atlanta and get home. This guy is crazy. But you know what? I humbled myself and understood what my role is. I went backstage. I had the whole band there, and I said, hey, a little change of plans here. We might only sing one song. So I got up there, and I sang the first song, and I didn't say a word, and I looked over at the pastor. I was over here, looked over, and he goes. So I sang the second song, and I looked over at him, and he goes. And I sang about 12 songs like that. Every time, at the end of every song. The point is, you're never too old to learn to submit. You know what? It wasn't fun for me. It wasn't fun, and I don't think he was. I think he was out of line, but at the same time, I submitted to that leadership. And I really think these are tests along the way where God is looking at your heart and saying, what really is in your heart? Are you willing to submit and die to yourself and to your agenda in order to serve someone else? That was the lesson for me. So when your pastor says something like that to you, just submit. Just do it. I don't know that they're always right, but it's never wrong to submit and just humble yourself and do the job. Okay? And do it unto the Lord. Don't do it begrudgingly. Just do it. So we talked about understanding your audience. There's 5 questions that I always ask when somebody asks when I'm asked to lead worship. Number 1 is, who's the audience? I was singing at a conference in Florida, and I was asked to lead worship at this breakfast. At a breakfast, it was a 7 o'clock breakfast, and all kinds of retailers there, and there's a couple thousand people at this big convention center. So I was thinking in my head, okay, I'm going to take 15 minutes and we're going to worship the Lord. No, that wasn't the agenda. Guess what I was? I was the entertainment while the people ate their breakfast. So, because I didn't, I forgot to ask who the audience was. I thought I knew what I was supposed to do, and that's the other thing I asked. What is the expectation of the organizer or your pastor? What's their expectations? My expectations were, I'm going to lead worship for this group of people, and we're going to have a wonderful time starting our day with worship. No, it was like they had somebody come up and pray for the food, and then okay, Don, come up and sing. So I'm like, give thanks with the, and I hear clanking and coffee cups, and it was, everybody was doing their own thing, and it was like this little voice appeared, and he was paying attention to what I was doing, and so understand who your audience is. If they're old, if they're young, you might need to change your program. Understand what the organizer's expectations are. What's your pastor's expectations? If you're singing for Elia, I was at the Gideon's International Conference in New Orleans. I met this guy here. But when I said yes to that invitation, I knew what they wanted me to do. There's a lot of speakers and a lot of agenda and 5,000 people from all over the world, and they're not there to hear Don Moen. I knew what I was there to do. It was like kind of be the walking music between speakers, you know, like, and now Don, lead us in worship while we all stretch our legs a little bit, you know. If I would have gone in there and thought, hey, we're going to have this deep moment of worship, you know, it wouldn't have worked. But I understood what my role was, and I tried to pick songs that people could quickly grab a hold of, and I did my job. And it wasn't the setting to say, everybody, let's just get on our faces and worship the Lord. It wasn't that at all. So it's important that you understand when you get into an environment what the expectations are of those who are organizing it. If your pastor is doing a missions conference, on his mind he's thinking, I've got 5 speakers I've got to get through today. He's thinking that. You're thinking, oh, I get to sing my song to all these people. No, your job is to take your 5 minutes, it's about 5 or 10 minutes, sing the songs, and, you know, work into the agenda of what their expectations are. And then, what are God's expectations? What do you think God expects when we come together to worship? Psalm 22 verse 3 says, God is enthroned in the praises of his people. So I really believe that when we gather together, even if you have 5 minutes, what God expects is that he will come and heal, save, deliver. And you as a worship leader need to understand and begin to expect that when you get up to lead. Why wouldn't people get healed in God's presence? Expect it. Expect them to get saved. Expect them to get encouraged. You know, those are your expectations. And so there's just some things to think about before you get up to lead worship. If you think some of these things through ahead of time, you won't be so distracted when you look out at the audience and they're all 80 years old or older, and they're just kind of, you know, they're getting tired. They don't want to stand. So have them sit down. You know, I mean, a lot of people, you know, whenever you come to worship, let's stand. And I just want to say, why? There's nothing wrong with it. But if you're at a traditional church, anybody here at a kind of a traditional church? I mean, conservative traditional church here? Yeah. I mean, like I told you, I said to the folks last night, my father, he goes to the Norwegian Lutheran Church. And you better not have anybody stand longer than 1 minute. There's going to be some questions asked. Why did you make us stand for so long? You know, to say something like, let's just wait in the presence of the Lord for a couple moments. Well, that in my father's church, oh boy, he'll look a couple moments. He'll look at his watch and say, okay, you got 2 minutes. And if nothing happens, you know, you better have them sit down. So I'm always thinking about when, you know, your audience is you got a cross section of people out there, and sometimes grandmas and grandfathers, their legs hurt if they stand too long. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you all can sit down. Just sit. You can sit in the presence of God and worship. You know, and I love when they stand, but I say, you can sit down. When we come into God's presence, it should be just like coming to the Father's house. Come into your Father's house. It's be yourself. Enjoy the presence of God, okay? Everybody's a little bit different in their personalities. You know a guy named Ron Canoli? Do you know that name at all? I traveled a lot with Ron, and I signed him. We did our first record with him. Jesus is Alive was the first one we did. But And Ron and I were touring, and it was at the Fox Theater in St. Louis, Missouri. And Ron's the kind of guy that he wants everybody engaged all the time. You know, just stand up, lift your hand, you know. And there was a guy down here in the third row who didn't do anything that Ron said all night long. And I was kind of back watching this, and Ron kind of walked to the front of the stage. He said, "Sir, you haven't done one thing I've asked you to do all night long." And the guy just kind of stared at him, and the guy next to him said, "He's deaf." So, don't be too disoriented. People don't respond to you all the time. Listen, the people that come into your church, you don't know what they've been through. One of them has just been through hell. I mean, they might have gone through a death in the family. They might have lost their job. They kind of gone through a divorce. I mean, their son or anything could have happened. And then you see this lady sitting out there and you want to say, "Hey, come on, get up and worship." And all she's doing is sitting there saying, "I don't even know how I'm still alive." So you got to understand, those people are out in your congregation. And it's like, don't make them go through the motions, because it may fool people and it may fool their neighbor, but it's not going to fool God. Your goal as a worship leader is to get them to offer a sincere sacrifice of praise. Whatever they do, maybe all they can do is sit there and say, "Lord, you know I love you. I don't even know how I'm still alive, but that's what I offer you today." You got to understand, there are people like that in your congregation. So don't be too hard on them if they're sitting there like, you know, maybe they're deep in thought. All the more reason why you need to find a song or something that touches their heart. Just give them that 60 seconds where they connect with God. God can change their heart. But don't try to make something happen, you know, so that it looks like, sounds like, feels like this over-the-top worship experience. I think there's a real danger, especially what we've tried to do in to make it into something it's not. I say to worship leaders sometimes, what if next week, when you go to your church service, there's no piano, there's no guitar, there's no drums, there's nothing on the stage. What will your worship look like? Will you still worship? Yes. Yeah, but think about it. But see, we've made it into a little bit of a spectator sport. We've gotten good at it. We've gotten really good at a band and the production and the technology. And people don't need that. Like I say, I'm a producer. I love all that stuff. But that's not what's going to change a life. Let's use it as much as we can. But in the end, at the end of the day, the only thing that will change a life is the presence of God. What is it in Nehemiah chapter 8 or 6, when Ezra got up to read from the scrolls? He opened the scrolls, the Word of God, to read, and the people fell on their faces and worshiped. They didn't sing. He just read the Word of God, and people fell on their faces and worshiped. And I tell you, we've gotten so accustomed to, hey, whatever's happening on this stage, you better dial it up and make it feel like something so we can feel like we worshiped. And I'd really like to experiment sometime, take it all the way, and come to church. What is your worship going to look like? Yeah. Something to think about. You know, and that's why I say worship. How long has it been since somebody's gotten up and given a testimony at your church? You know, well, there used to be these times when people would give a testimony of what God had done. That's part of when have somebody come up and give a testimony. People rejoice at what God has done. Sometimes I say, Pastor, why don't you get up and preach first? And then as a response to the word, let's give thanks and worship. You know, I like to do that because people come in late. And they get so accustomed to coming in through the third or fourth song, and it's like in the past, they know what's going to happen. That's why I'm just a rebel enough. My mother used to say to me, Donnie, you're the black sheep of this family. You give us more grief than all the other children put together. And I wasn't a bad kid, but I was a little bit mischievous. But you know, when I see an audience or a congregation that's on autopilot, they know what's going to happen next. That's why I love to start the service, and it starts at 10 o'clock. Pastor Moen, get up, 10 o'clock. Open your Bibles with me, too. And people are like, what? And then people are coming in late, and you're on your third point of the sermon. And just when they get used to coming on time to hear the word, then I'd say, oh, no, we're going to for the first 30 minutes, and then pastor's going to speak. I just don't like to see people like, I know what's going to happen next, you know. And, they go on autopilot. Okay, are you learning anything? Yes. We could open these things up to some questions. I'm going to quickly talk about, we are going to get to songwriting a little bit. You know, let me talk to you about planning your worship service. You got to think about what song you begin with. Do you think about that when you plan it out? Okay, do you plan your service? What did you sing last Friday? I mean, what are you doing next week? Have you thought about it?
Yeah.
You play piano. Yeah, but when you're planning your worship service, you think about things like what at least you should think about it. You know, when I was with Integrity Music, we planned. Remember all the Hosanna recordings? I spent hours and hours and hours with Tom Brooks and other producers trying to think about what song should be first, what song should be second, and I think about that all the time in my set lists now. I think, how does it set the tone for the service? If you start with a, you know, and again, you need to do this with your pastor too, because if you feel like you want to start really slow, and your pastor is thinking, hey, no, we need an up-tempo song, you know. And remember, the Bible doesn't say enter his gates with a fast song and his courts with a slow song. Enter his gates with and his courts with praise. Yeah. So it doesn't talk about fast and slow, but we have gotten to the point where our services are it's just a liturgy. It's the same thing all over. It's fast, 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 fast. And I just want to ask the question, why? Have you thought it through? Why do the same thing over and over again? But you do need to think about the tone that it sets. If you start a song, you know, in this minor key, that's probably going to, you know, get people a little, you know, it's just not the way to set something up. It's a minor key. You know, I love this. I love Our Father, and you know, hear our prayer. We are children gathered here today. But it ends like this: forgive our sins, we pray. Forgive our sins, we pray. It just kind of sits there, and I always, it's like, okay, it ends with forgive our sins. It's kind of a somber statement, you know. So I'm always careful about where I place that song. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through these things, but think about how your service starts. What's the first song that you're going to sing? Anybody want to offer? Anybody? How about your song list from last week? Anybody want to offer what your song list was from last week? What? What song did you start with last week? Anybody? Raise your hand. So you don't even know. Right? Which one?
Kalimutan ko yung mga kanta ko yun.
Which song? My Redeemer. That's a good one. Yeah, it's an up song. Which one? Open the Gates by who's it? Okay. Are you doing any of Sinasha's songs? Yeah, you do? Yeah. I'll be with her next week actually in Nigeria. But, yeah. What did you do? I don't know that song, but you know. Anyway, we could go on, but you know what? You have to think about what's the first song. Now the thing is, your pastor probably wants, hey, this is the opening song. It's a, you know, it's gotta move a bit. So that's what your pastor is thinking about. So my guess is, 70-80% of you probably started with an up-tempo song, just because you do. And I would just like to ask you, why did you do that? I mean, I'm just asking why. And I think as worship leaders and as leaders, you need to ask yourself that question all the time. Why did I do that? And well, what can I do better? When you walk off the stage, you shouldn't be thinking, hey, the front 3 rows of the church loved what did you see them jumping? No. You think about how you should meet with your worship team and say, what did we do that worked? And what did we do that we could have done better? Ask the question. You need to be doing that all the time. And so that's the way you're going to get better, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we are in the Arabic church, and we actually, our worship leader decided to start a song that talks about, Lord, please create in me a pure heart. So it was a very calm song just to create the vibe, to set the tone as you speak to.
Yeah, that's a little more where I am when I went to start with the worship leader. Everybody has a different personality, but when I was, after coming across the parking lot with 5 little kids and all this stuff, I felt I need to sit down and sing, just as I am, without one. I mean, but a clean heart. That to me is a great message when you think about coming into the presence of God. It's preparation. You get your heart right. Because you can go through the motions and some people, that's the whole service. They just go through the motions and it looks like, sounds like, feels like something great. But inside their heart is aching and they're longing to see that. So think about that. How a song ends, how a song starts, and how it sets a tone for the worship service. So just be willing to shake it up a bit. Do it with your pastor. And I want to ask you, get out of this liturgy that you're stuck in. 3 fast songs, a transition song, the pastor gets up to take the offering, a special number from a soloist, 1 song and the sermon. Right? Stop it. Just shake it up a little bit. Just try to do something different. Again, don't go back to your pastor and say, I was at a Don Moen seminar and he said I could do this. Don't do that. I'm on your pastor's side, okay? But I just want to put it out there because I want you to ask that question. Why are you doing it? And how can you do it better? And if we don't ask those questions, we'll never get better. See, God is doing something new all the time. I just did an interview on our YouTube channel. By the way, you need to, there's all kinds of teaching and stuff. That's donmoen.tv. Go to that. It's all free stuff. donmoen.tv, and you'll see we got over 400 videos. It's teaching, training, and lately I've started doing some interviews with Lenny LeBlanc, Paul Overstreet, who I wrote God is Good All the Time with, and I did an interview with Chester Thompson, who was drummer on a lot of the videos. He was with Phil Collins and Genesis, and Chester is a good friend of mine. But he said something. He said, if God was a musician, he would be a jazz musician, because he never plays it the same way twice. And it's true. I mean, God does things different all the time. And we want to get in this little liturgy of it has to look this way, be this way. And I just want to challenge you to shake it up a little bit. To shake it up a little bit. And you know what? I think there's a lot of the Psalms, I think there are a lot of songs yet to be written that are that you need to, it's not gonna be the kind of song where you stand up, yes, yes, you know, it's, sometimes you just need to sit down and just listen to these songs. Read the Psalms of David. Hey, these are songs that they sang that he wrote. Psalm 109, read through that sometime. I mean, I love the band, but the temptation is for young musicians to overplay. Did I hear an amen there? You get a drummer, and he's on the stage for the first time saying, yes, I get to play drums, and he's all over the place, and it's loud, and he's, and then, or you get a guitar player and say, yeah, I'm going to do every lick I've ever learned, and it's just chaos. And you need to teach your worship band not to overplay. Less is more. This stuff. And then it just gets chaotic. It's chaos. It's noise. And let's talk a little bit about the sound, for instance. How many people are using in-ear monitors in your churches? You know the in-ear systems. Anybody have those? How many are using just monitors like this? Yeah. Okay. Well, here's the thing about monitors. These wedges, they can create a lot of noise on the platform. So much noise on the platform that it bounces off this back wall, and the people are hearing all the bounce back rather than from the speakers. And you get the singers up there, and you got 3 or 4 singers that say, I need to hear more of me. And the tenor, the guy, I need to hear more of me. Well, then the worship leader says, I need to hear more of me. And the drummer is saying, I need to hear more of me. And the next thing you know, you've got so much sound on this stage that it's crazy. And you could turn off the speakers, and there'd be the people would hear all the monitors. That's what they'd hear. And I would just, when that starts happening, I'd be tempted to turn the monitors off completely. Because you know what happens then? The singers have to listen to each other. There's something called blending, okay? A little thing about the altos and tenors and sopranos listening to each other and singing as a group. So these monitors have created a lot of problems. And everybody is so insecure. I can't hear myself. I can't hear myself. Well, listen to your neighbor. Just listen a little bit. So we have gone. Last night we had wedges on the stage, but most of the time we travel with an in-ear monitor system, which I think is affecting my hearing, by the way. But what it does is it completely cuts the sound off the stage, except for the acoustic sound of the drums. But it gives a lot more definition to the audience because everybody has their individual ears. The problem with that is you could get lost in your own little world. and you have this studio-like environment in your ears, like, oh my gosh, it sounds great. Meanwhile, you see somebody passing out in the audience, you don't even know it. So a lot of times when I do, I'll take one ear out, which is not a good thing. And it's, you know, the band likes it because they can hear each other, but the danger is you forget you're not in a studio. You are there to create an environment for the congregation, see? So you become isolated. So you just need to be careful about all those things and use them with discretion and never lose touch of what your job is as a worship leader. Let's talk briefly about the sound engineer, which I believe is the most important job in your worship team. It's the guy or gal that doesn't get a lot of attention except when things go wrong. But Christo actually, I've known him for years. He's from Johannesburg, but he has a school, an engineering school, teaching people how to engineer. I don't know, can these, you're starting one in Nigeria too, right? But how can they get, is it Christo, what's the name of the school if they wanted to? Academy of Sound Engineering.com? What's that? Okay, Academy of Sound Engineering.co.za. Easy one is ASE@.co.za. ASC. Anyway, Academy of Sound Engineering. ASE, right? ACE, like ASE. But you know what? Our sound engineers, that the guy or gals, and usually they're sitting out there, they can sabotage everything you've done. And pastors, they can sabotage you as well. If you got a sound engineer out there you got feedback, you got all these things going, the people can't hear. They need to hear the word. They need to hear what you're singing. And if you got somebody back at that mixing console who doesn't know what they're doing, you need to really pray that God sends someone. And you need someone who's just really good at soldering wires together. You need somebody who has, what are these things called? Ears. They need to have a sense of, it sounds right, it sounds wrong. And you can teach them the electronics of it all, but in the EQ, there's a lot of things you can learn. We have, if you go to the donmoen.tv, we have a whole series, and I talked to Chuck Harris, our engineer, all about these things. And he teaches sound engineering, just some basic stuff, or if you go to Christo's site as well, ace.co.za. But these are important things. And the sad thing is, a lot of sound engineers, because they have all these knobs in front of them, they have a sense of, I've got control. I've got the control of this whole service. And don't dare tell me how to do my job. It's really kind of sad, but you know, you get guys like that just get real protective. And you don't know a whole lot about sound. All you know is it's not working. But these guys, they need to have a servant heart. They need to understand they are there to make things work so that people can hear the message and they can hear the music. Now, you need to help them out. And if you're in a small building of 100 people, you don't need to be cranking on the drums, right, Tim? I mean, how many times we've been in a smaller venue and you have to take out your brushes? We do a sound check, and you know, Chuck comes up and he says, you guys are just gonna have to play way down. You're just gonna have to play with brushes. We've done it, and you play to the room. You don't have to just belt it out in a small building. Play to your environment. That will help out your sound engineer a lot. But your sound engineer needs to understand he's got one of the most important jobs in the worship team. But because, like I say, they can sabotage everything you work for. And I have sound engineers sometimes that you need to do this now. But when I'm singing sometimes, I get people that, they're messing around with the EQ, they're messing around with the, they're messing around with the delay and the reverb. And I'm singing, and you've probably heard it when you're preaching too. And all of a sudden, they're changing your voice around, and it just it's very distracting. Set it and leave it. And but boy, that job is so important. And pray for somebody that has the right attitude back there. And here's the sad thing. A lot of churches, I know you just built a new building, a new church in Chennai. But if you spend $1 million building here's kind of just the average. If you spend $1 million building a new church, you should spend at least 10% of that budget on a sound system. And all the pastors just gasp, $100,000. But they built a big building and they put 2 little speakers like this in it. Because they're trying to save the budget. And they have this big building which now can hold 5,000 people and nobody can hear. So then they start adding on and adding on and adding on, trying to make it work. You need to think about this when you are, when you build the building. You need to have some acoustic design. Think about it. But if you're building a $5 million church, think about spending $500,000 on a sound system. But that's really what it should take, because then you have a sound system that's adequate for your church. So anyway, don't just if you don't have that person on your team, just pray that God sends you a sound engineer, because that really is, I think, the most important person on your team. You can rehearse for 6 months to try to get your sound just perfect. Pastor, you can prepare your sermon for months and try to make the points, and if this guy is sleeping back there or messing around with this, people are saying, I can't hear. Well, he can sabotage everything. So pray for that guy. Get that right guy. Gosh, I'm out of time. Almost. Okay, songwriting. I told you I'd talk a little bit about songwriting. Do you want me to talk about it or not?
Yes.
Okay, real quick. What makes a good song? Is it catchy? What'd you say? Biblical. That's a good word. Is it biblical? Okay, if you want to write a song, first of all, I told you already, you need to have leather skin. Because people are going to critique your song. Okay? That's the first thing. If you want to be a songwriter, you just got to know that people are going to tell you have a bad song. It will happen. And just be prepared for it. If you write a song, you got to be prepared to be objective. Put it up there and say, okay, I'm looking at it from this way, I'm looking at it from this way, how's it look? Just be objective. Stop being so subjective about it. Especially in Christian music. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, where there are so many songwriters, and they go to work every day to write songs. They write in the morning, they write in the afternoon, and they write in the evening, every single day. So they're always perfecting their craft. We, as worship leaders, are spending some time with the Lord, and suddenly, this song comes to my heart. God gave me a song. So you want to sing it just the way He gave it to you. But because you think it's holy, it's anointed, well, it might be a good idea, but it might need some work. And when you get an idea, write the idea down, but sometimes it just takes hard work going through it and combing out the little snags and make a good song into a great song. But it takes work. The initial inspiration can come, and you need to have your smartphone or whatever and always record those ideas. Keep a journal. You're going to be in a time of prayer and a time of ministry. Have you ever been in a time of ministry where you would think, if I only had a song that said this, Have you ever had that thought? Write that down, because I think that's a great Holy Spirit inspired starting point. Write it down. Get it. I've got a lot of things on my phone here, a lot of ideas. If I think of something, I'll play a melody, I'll write it down, and when I get a chance to write, I'll go listen to all those things, and I won't play any right now. It'll be embarrassing, but if you want to see me embarrassed, let me see here. But you need to be doing this as melody. I got all kinds of things. Melody, another melody. Wow. Lots of songs for my grandkids. I see that. I was trying to find a song that I was working on a while back that I think I'll finish one day. No, I can't find it right now. But yeah, just, melody. Boy, I got a lot of things called melody. So when I go to write, I'll start pulling these things up, whatever this is. I don't know what it is. Let's see, melody. Who knows? Anyway, I got 100 of those. Just little ideas here and there. So that's what you need to do. And just write them down. And then when you have some time, go through and spend some time, some blood, sweat, and tears, and make a great idea, a good idea, into a great song. When I was at Integrity Music, I would review 1,000 songs. Out of 1,000 songs, there would be 100 songs that I would say, this is not bad. Out of those 100 songs, I would pick 10 that we would record. Out of those 10, there would be one song like Shout to the Lord, or Give Thanks, or something like that. It's just that, it's just to have a great song, you got to keep working at it. I remember the first time, I was the first one to record Shout to the Lord in the United States, and I was in Australia in '94, and I heard Darlene sing it. And I said, I want to record your song on an album called Rivers of Joy. And I said, I'd like to just change one note. And she goes, what would you like to do, Don? And I said, okay, let's sing. My Jesus, sing with me. My Savior. Whoa. My Jesus. My Savior. Whoa, it's too low, right? Good for the girls. Just the men, please. My Jesus. My. Whoa. So I said to Darlene, she goes, what would you like to change? I said, and it's a little rangy on that one note, so I'd like to do my Jesus, my Savior, Lord. And she said no. And that was the end of that conversation. So, and it's proved to be a horrible song, right? No, it's a great song, but it is a little rangy. So I usually throw that melody to an alto girl. For the women, it's a perfect range. When you're writing, think about the range you're writing in. A good singing range is like middle C, to an octave down. That C to C, maybe C to D. I mean, that range is good for most people. So think about the range. Does that range issue make Shout to the Lord a bad song? No. It's, what's good about the song? Shout to the, notice how the word shout matches where the melody goes. Shout to the, Reuben Morgan wrote a song, from the mountains to the valley, hear our praises. Okay, then just analyze that. You see how the lyric kind of follows the melody. Now, I don't know if Reuben did that intentionally, but what happens when those things are in a song, the congregation or the audience is not real sophisticated most of the time, but those little things make it easy to sing. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. Same melody. I'm so glad you're in my life. Same melody. I'm so glad you came to save my life. Okay, well, what's good about that? First of all, it's easily accessible, right? And I think the hook of that song is, you came from heaven to earth to show the way. From the earth to the cross, my debt to pay. From the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky, Lord. I mean, there's the gospel, and I think that's kind of the hook of the song. It works. And any guitar player can play it. Lord, I lift it. 4 chords, pretty much the same. Easy. Open the eyes of my heart. Good or bad song? And what's good about it? Yeah. Well, it's a universal prayer, right? Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. What a great prayer. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Same thing. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. I mean, it's just not real sophisticated, but it's just simple, and it is a universal prayer. Who does not want to sing that? It just kind of says what needs to be said. So, you think about that, and what makes a great song, I talked about keeping a journal. Write these things down, and when you have an idea of a song, I would challenge you, if we had a songwriting class here, I would give you an assignment, maybe a phrase from the Psalms or something like that, and I would have you bring the song to me, and I would then send you back and say, now write it a completely different way. And you're going to say, well, I can't. The Lord gave it to me that way. Are you limiting what God can do? I wrote radio and television commercials for several years, and I didn't get paid until the ad agency bought my song, and they were not Christians. They didn't say, "Hey, brother, that's really good. We love it." No, they say, "We hate that. Write the song a different way." So it was good practice for me. So that's what I would say to you as a writer. Write it one way, and then I challenge you to write it another way. And then I challenge you to write it another way. Just get good at doing these things, And, I had a girl come to my office one day, and she said, the Lord gave me this song. And I said, well, let me hear it. She goes, praise you, Lord. Oh, I praise you, Lord. You're the one we adore. I said, it sounds a lot like, there she is, Miss America. There she is, our idea. And it's exactly the same. She goes, it does not. I said, yes, it is. It is that song. And she burst into tears and was all upset about it. One day I was in my house, my kids were little. I was writing this beautiful melody that I thought everybody's going to. I just had a vision of hundreds of people being healed. It was a song about healing. It was that. And Michael, my son, walked by with a glass of milk. He said, "Oh, you're playing theme from Lion King, hey, Dad?" Oh, no, I am. I felt so stupid. I felt so bad and so embarrassed that Elton John got there before I did. But, it happens. It happens. And somebody's going to say that to you, and it sounds exactly like that. You know, there's just melodies floating and you're floating around all the time. But you know what? It is what it is, and I would challenge you to keep writing. And when somebody, you know, the best gateway to get your songs out there, go to your worship pastor. I would start there with your music director, or to your pastor, and say, "Here's a song I'd like to submit." And if he says it's bad, you know, write another one. You know, I had this. People do this to me all the time. But this girl said, "Here's 10 songs I've written. They are super anointed, and my music director and my pastor are not spiritual enough to perceive how anointed they are." And I said, "Well, let me listen." I said, "No, your pastor and your music director were right. That's garbage. You know, they aren't anointed." And it's just like, you know. So you know, there's a gateway. If a good song will always make it to the top. Now, it used to be you needed a publisher to get your songs out. These days, with YouTube and the internet, you'd be amazed at how you can get a song out there and it can start to travel. And I'm just going to tell you, a good song will always make it out there. It will make it out to the congregations. It'll make it out to the people. A bad song won't, but these days, you may not have a publisher that would sign your songs, but most of the time in the older days, publishers would not receive songs from unknown sources anyway. So there's a lot of frustrated songwriters out there, but now with YouTube, you can get up there with your guitar and just play the song and see what happens. You can try anything. So I'd encourage you to do that, but the thing is, just keep writing. Keep writing. Don't stop. You know, if you get another idea, write it down. Think about universal themes. Don't try to, in your lyrics, don't try to include the story of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation in your song. Remember we talked about that Holy Spirit thought? That one thought? Write that down and just kind of meditate on that, and then write the song that supports that one phrase. You know, don't make it complicated, and you don't want to make it complicated musically, because that will go over the heads of most people. And then the first time when you sing your song to a congregation, listen to your congregation, watch them. If they're just like, you know, they don't get it or nobody sings, chances are you need to go back and work on it a little bit. Lenny LeBlanc, you saw Lenny, and I feel bad he's not with me on this tour. He would be, but he had a previous date in Papua New Guinea. That's where he is this weekend. But Lenny wrote the song, "There is none like you, no one else can touch my heart like you do. And I could search for all eternity long and find there is none like you." Aha, wrong. Lenny, and I love doing this to Lenny. I love doing this. I said, "Lenny, did you listen to the congregation the first time you sang that song?" He goes, "No, I don't think so." I said, "Obviously you did not. Because if you would have written the song, the last phrase, 'There is none like you.'" But here's what he wrote. "There is none like you." That's what he wrote. So, we had fun with that when Lenny's with me. I had the audience do just that. And I said, "Did you hear that? See, did you hear that?" And he said, "That's boring. Why would I write that?" So listen to the congregation. When they sing your song for the first time, listen to them. But don't be afraid of getting some criticism. Play it for your music director. Play it for your pastor. Just say, "What do you think?" Play it for a friend. If you're going to collaborate with somebody, maybe you're really good at writing melodies, but you're lousy at writing lyrics, then get with somebody. You know, somebody who's a good lyricist, or somebody that writes good poetry. Bring it to somebody that writes good music. and see what you can develop together. And when you go into collaborating with somebody, if you're going to sit there and say, hey, let's write a song together, don't go into the session empty-handed. Don't go in and say, hey, what do you have? I don't know. What do you have? Well, I don't know. What do you have? I mean, it's just a waste of time. So if you're going to sit and write a song, go in, be prepared. Offer something to the meeting. Paul Balash is great at this. He's always listening to what people say. I'll be sitting having coffee with him or at a restaurant, and the server will come over and say something. He goes, what did you just say? And she goes, and said this. He goes, wow, I've never heard it said like that before. And he'll write it down. You know, he's always listening, always listening. So open your ears, and then, of course, open your spirit. Ask the Lord to give you new melodies, new chords. Ask God what He wants you to say. What do you think your congregation wants to say to Him? Sometimes I like to write in an empty church. Just sit out there all by myself and just say, what do I want to say to God today? And I write that down. And then I say, what does God want to say to me? And I'll write that down. But those are kind of things, you know, ask the Holy Spirit to give you something fresh and new. You know, work hard at rhyming. You know, you don't have to rhyme love and dove and above. Although I've probably done that in a song. But, you know, just kind of be a good critic of your own songs. You know, just be objective. Step back and say, I wonder. There's this one girl, Mia Fields. Do you know her at all? Mia Fields is a Hillsong gal. She's a real good lyricist. And when I write with her, I'll come up with another verse in a song, and I'll use a word that I used in the first verse. She goes, nope, the English language has 333,000 words or something. She gives me this big number, and she goes, there's no excuse to use the same word twice. So, you know, just be creative. Okay? Well, it's past time. Oh, good, we don't have any time for questions. Yeah, I'm sorry that I went longer than I should have gone here. Anything that's just a burning question, I'll take one or two questions and that's it. Otherwise, I'll just pray for you.